welcome to episode 5 of The Rational Homer. I am your host, Kyle. Today is Monday, March 23rd. Joining us again in a bit will be my friend Andy for the third consecutive week. However, we might see flashes of angry Andy as we talk about Kentucky getting demolished by my Iowa State Cyclones. And then on the flip side, we'll see extremely elated Andy as the Iowa Hawkeyes took care of the one-seeded Gators and did the Gator Chop afterwards. We'll talk briefly about the round of 64 and 32 matchups and how the teams got to the Sweet 16, and then we'll break down the Sweet 16 matchups and go to potential Elite 8 matchups, as those will both take place this week, Thursday through Sunday. And we are back with Andrew to go over the bracket from this past weekend. Starting in the East, we have Duke being the first team to the Sweet 16. They beat Siena after trailing by 11 at halftime. That was a good game. And Siena kind of ran out of gas towards the end as they missed 7 of 8 shots. And then TCU beat Ohio State in the 8-9 game. And then Duke ran away from TCU about midway through the second half. Jamie Dixon got a technical, and then the wheels just kind of fell off from there. And they ended up winning by 23 over TCU. And what are your thoughts on Duke so far, Andrew?
Well, thanks again for having me. It was a fun first weekend. A lot of things to get to, but yeah, that Duke Siena game was awesome to watch, except for the fact that Siena ran out of gas. I mean, their starters played the entire game, which is crazy. Also, shout out to Riley Mulvey, former Hawkeye. I really wanted to see Duke lose there, but ultimately they get it done. And I think that kind of settled them in, as you can see with the 23-point win against TCU. I definitely think... Go ahead.
They were fully healthy again, too. I think
Right.
they were still missing a player in the opening round game, right? Their center.
Yeah. Yep. So, although I think they're definitely beatable, I don't think they're like this untouchable overall number 1 seed. And that's also probably because I hate Duke. But yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at their team, and they got Cameron Boozer, who really disappeared in one half of each game so far. He finally came on in the second half against TCU and really led them in their victory. The first half, him and his brother only combined for, 3 points, and it just seems like, as good as he is, he gets very passive and kind of gets neutralized for a half, and, that's very scary for a team that needs him to be, hitting his average at least and getting, just dominating the post.
Right. I think in some of these games going forward, you'll see him be a little bit more aggressive for that reason. And don't forget, they're still missing Caleb Foster for the rest of the year, second best player. So they aren't technically full strength, which is why I think they are so beatable.
Yeah. And then moving on to who will play, we'll end up playing St. John's, and St. John's walloped Northern Iowa, and then almost blew the game against Kansas, but pulled it out on the last-second buzzer beater. Nice drive to the hoop and a layup. Kansas beat California St. Baptist by 8 points, and just very interesting how Kansas came back in that game, led by Peterson, and I really thought Kansas was done, but they made a game of it.
Yeah, I mean, St. John's, I think they're good. They have their weaknesses, but I figured they would get at least this far, and I hope they give Duke a good matchup. Like you said, almost blew that game to Kansas, and like we talked last week, Kansas is just so feast or famine. They can look amazing. They can look pretty mediocre, and I would say both their games, they didn't look like much, and even with Peterson. So I wasn't shocked to see them get beat, even though they did mount a good comeback. Like I said last week, now we're officially on Bill Self retiring watch.
Yes, and it wasn't a typical Bill Self team heading into the tournament.
No,
Which is
not at all.
another thing to note. There's no Perry Ellis, who looks 30 years old, or Ben
Right.
McLemore, or Mario Chalmers, none of those guys.
Yep, that's a good point. And like I said I know all the UNI fans listening, Rick Pitino wasn't losing that game, and yeah, it wasn't close.
Yeah, I mean, it was a brutal watch. It was pretty brutal.
Right. Yeah, it was.
But looking at Duke and St. John's, what do you think of this matchup?
Yeah, I think Rick Pitino is going to make this kind of a grinded out game just because that's kind of the team that he has. I certainly think they have what it takes to beat Duke. But, Duke's super talented. They're favored by 6.5. I think I'm more hoping if Duke gets beat, but I do think they're the better team.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that as well. You know, St. John's has Hopkins, and they have that big man in the post,
Yeah,
Owuche, whatever,
Ejiofor,
Ejiofor, and you know, just a very interesting game. And you know, Rick Pitino made his comeback as coach after his trouble at Louisville, and you know, it's kind of a good story in some ways.
yeah. I mean, he's obviously an amazing coach, and he advances in the tournament when he's there. So I think this is going to come down to the end.
And I would definitely take Rick Pitino over Shire, even though Shire is, you know, has been there a few years now and coached under Krzyzewski, but I still think I take Rick Pitino here.
Agreed.
Then moving on to the bottom half of the quadrant, we have Michigan State advancing to the Sweet 16 as they snuck by Louisville and took care of North Dakota State pretty easily. Tom, as you said, Tozo pretty much guaranteed for the Sweet 16 almost. Seems like with the teams they put
Hmm.
together, they got Sears, they got a couple big guys, just a very good team. And then you look at Louisville. Louisville, you know, won their first round game without their leading scorer Brown. Put up kind of a fight against Michigan State, but just didn't quite have enough. What were your thoughts on these series of games?
Yeah, kind of like we said, Izzo is just built for March. He's got a good core of guys who have been there for a while. Fears obviously leads the way. Easy first game. They were always going to beat Louisville. They didn't really, like you said, it was close, kind of, but at the same time, they were always in control. I like them to even get past Connecticut here just with the way they're playing. We'll see. It's just, yeah. I think Izzo, 28 years in a row for Michigan State going to the tournament. He's just, yeah, really solid.
Yeah, and then you look at the other series of games in this bracket, or the bottom. You got UCLA beat UCF in a pretty close game, and UConn took care of Furman pretty easily, and they just dismantled UCLA. You know, I kind of thought it would be a little bit closer, and UCLA was leading in the beginning a bit, but man, UConn is. They're still scary, even though they don't have any like super signature guys like Kimball Walker or Ryan Boatright.
Yeah, I thought early on that UCLA was going to give him a game, and it was close for a bit, but ultimately, Connecticut's definitely playing a little bit better than I thought they would or gave him credit for. So, yeah, it's going to be a tough game against Michigan State. I think either team that wins that, though, could easily get to the Final Four. So, it's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, and UConn is favored by 2.5 right now. We'll see if that line changes at all during the week, but I mean, should be a great game, and we will see who is moving on to the Elite Eight on what is that, Friday?
They play Friday, yep.
And then for the other series of games, we go down to the South bracket. We got Florida, who got by the first round matchup, and then somehow managed to lose to Iowa. Not sure how that happened still. As I sit
Ben
here,
McCollum, greatest coach in the country. That's how that happened.
yeah, I mean, I think TJ also had something to say about that. But anywho, Iowa, after possibly a horrible watching Iowa play Clemson, that was a tough game to watch and not much offense. And, you know, just kind of a tough game. Iowa put together a masterpiece against Florida. Was up by double-digit points during the second half as well. What are your thoughts on the Iowa-Florida game specifically, and then, you know, just Iowa going forward?
I mean, it was an unbelievable game. I was driving back from the Chicago airport after a fun week in North Carolina. And so I was watching the game while keeping my eyes on the road, living and dying by every basket. I thought McCollum had an unreal game plan to start the game against Florida and even deep in the kind of midway. Well, I would say like the 15-minute mark of the second half, Todd Golden and Florida made adjustments and made it a lot trickier for Iowa to get to their spots. And just offensively, they started scoring a little bit more. But
Yeah,
Hawks,
they started getting cut to the basket a little bit easier.
right. And the Hawks just kind of hung just around just enough where they ended up getting down a few points towards the end. I was just saying in the last 2 minutes, if we can keep it a one possession game, we got a legit shot. And that's kind of what happened. Had him miss one of the two free throws on a 1-and-1. And I was like, just, it's March. Just get to the end and see what happens. That final play of the game, Florida's defense was uh, insane that they covered us the way they did, let us basically run like a fast break offense, find Fulgaris for a wide open three, and he knocks it down. And Just what kind of a classic game for what it takes to get to the Sweet 16 and pull off a massive upset. It's just crazy that it's been since 1999 to get this far. Sometimes, as an Iowa fan, you think this day will never come, while at the same time, you get a guy like Ben McCollum who eerily similar to Kurt Signetti in trajectory of coaching. And I'm obviously, as an Iowa fan, going to run with that completely. Let's just see what happens. You get a game against Nebraska, a rival, third game of the season, split 1-1. One goes to overtime, one's in the 50s. There's just they have their best players, a former Iowa transfer, and Price Sanford. There's just so many storylines. Fred Hoiberg used to be in Ames. It's um it's gonna be awesome to watch. I can't
Yeah,
wait.
and one quick note on Iowa and the Florida game. Uh, the fact that Bennett Sturts went 0 for 9 from 3 and Iowa
Right.
still won that game is absolute. I mean, if you would have told me that before the game started, I would have told you absolutely insane to say that that would happen.
Yeah, I mean, I thought we were gonna lose by 10 to 14 points and be like within 6 to 10 the whole game and just not have quite enough. And then you see Sturts go 0 for 9. Like you said, I would have been like, okay, it was 15 to 20 point loss. But it shocked me that we were the tougher team, kind of punched them in the mouth. Our guys, Tavian Banks is insane for his size. How he was able to go right at Florida's bigs that I thought just wasn't possible. We scored so many points in the paint. It was kind of surreal. And then when you reflect on the game and the upset, you're just like, wow, how did that all happen? But I think it's just a testament to a gutsy effort and a great coaching game plan.
Yeah, and maybe Florida got a little sensitive during a couple moments during that game, and
I love that.
specifically, jump ball that turned into a double technical on a takedown, and then maybe a punch. We're not really sure what that was.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it was a very, very good game. Love to see the upset. Florida is probably hurting a little bit today. Florida fans and the coach as well.
For sure. And I mean, the difference between last year's championship team with Florida and this year's team, the guard play this year improved by the end with Xavier Lee and Boogie Fland, but it just was nowhere near like Walter Clayton Jr. from last year.
Yeah,
And guards are what gets you through the tournament, and they kind of just they weren't bad, but they just weren't good enough, and they were ripe for an upset like tonight or last night. So it was pretty awesome as a Hawkeye fan.
yeah. You need your guards to take care of the ball. When your two guards have 3 turnovers and 2 turnovers, and they account for about half of your turnovers. When you have 11 as a team, which is still a great number to only have 11 and 40 minutes of play, you know, it's very important to have excellent guard play like Sturts, even though he shot horribly, he had 0 turnovers. So,
Yeah, and he just controlled the game well, and you know that he's running like the whole game plan, even like you said, if he's not knocking down shots.
yeah. And I mean, you have to give a shout out to Cooper Koch, who made 4 3-pointers. He's kind of a guy that struggled during Big Ten play at times, but, he's really been great towards the end of the season here. And it's very important to have somebody with Sturts that can put a little pressure on the defense.
Yeah, he's been awesome, kind of developing throughout the year. Had some moments, where it felt like he disappeared. He's come on so strong. Last time we went to the Sweet 16, his dad, Jared Koch, was on the team, so it was awesome to see them just celebrating after the win. He's just such like a valuable piece to give us some offense at times when Sturts isn't doing everything.
Yeah, and I mean, you also have to, obviously Fulgaris gets a huge shout out for making the final three, but for him scoring 14 points in 18 minutes and pulling down 5 boards against those bigs of Florida, I mean, that's something to be impressive too. And his mom got to see him play at Iowa for the second time, and, I think that was a very special moment for him as well.
Yeah, another guy who's super talented, has had some ups and downs in the last month or so. But like you said, having his mom there, hits the game winning three, 14 points, only played 18 minutes, those 5 rebounds, and then he 6 for 6 from the free throw line, just steady, gives you offense when you need it. Second leading scorer of the game. It was kind of like you needed that type of performance to have a shot, and he gave it to you.
Yeah, you didn't really expect him to be taking the final shot, but Man, it was a beautiful shot. It was
Yeah,
he got his foot behind the line and he just buried it.
yeah, perfect shot, perfect play. Fact that he knew where he was on the court, step back, get the three, which I was so happy about. I didn't want to see us go to overtime, obviously, against the number one seed, just go for the win, and that's kind of what they did.
Yeah, and I mean, Florida still had time to make a play, and they came down the court and drove under the hoop and tried to do a wraparound pass, and Iowa's defense was ready for it, and I think the Florida guy just kind of dropped it. Fulgeris was there to kind of just keep the ball, rummaging on the floor for, the final seconds so the guy couldn't either try to draw a foul, get in shot up, or anything like that.
Yeah, I think the way McCollum had I would defend that was awesome. Kind of brought everyone up a little bit further out just to force Xavier Lee to go deep, along the baseline and then tries to make that wraparound pass. But you have four Hawks right there. And it just was crazy when like you saw that pass get bobbled and the clock runs out and you're like, oh my gosh, we really won this game.
Crazy, crazy. Looking at who Iowa will play, Nebraska, as you said, that they beat Vanderbilt on barely as the ball was halfway down for Vanderbilt from half court and came back out. But I mean, talk about Nebraska and Hoiberg. I mean, they win their first tournament game ever, beating Troy. They somehow beat Vanderbilt, who was kind of extremely hot after beating Florida. Um, just very, very, very exciting game coming up. Big Ten matchup. Even though Nebraska is favored by a point and a half, I mean, I'm excited to watch this one on Thursday for sure.
Yeah, they've had a good run so far. They really handled Troy easily. And then they definitely were in control of the Vanderbilt game. Vanderbilt made that comeback at the end, but they're playing with more confidence. They definitely could have looked scared just, trying to get their first NCAA tournament win coming off a really good year where they feel like they need to capitalize on it. And I would say they have so far. And like I said, it's crazy that the Sweet 16 matchup is a third game of the year between the Hawks and the Cornhuskers. But I'm excited. I think it's going to be another grinded out game, not that high scoring,
Hmm.
and probably going to come down to the last 2 minutes for sure.
Yeah, and we'll see how that turns out, especially with, the history of Hoiberg not really liking Iowa, and that's kind of proven given his time at Iowa State. And yeah, it'll be fun.
For sure. It's going to be a great game.
And then going to the bottom half of the bracket, we got Illinois gets pounded VCU by 21. VCU got the upset over North Carolina, but just couldn't get anything going against Illinois. And Illinois came off a first round win against Fran McCaffrey and the University of Penn. And yeah, Illinois looked good.
Yeah, they're so talented, and as much as you hope for an upset, Penn obviously didn't have it. And then this VCU team with that crazy comeback against North Carolina not being that great once Caleb Wilson went out. I kind of knew that VCU they kind of had more of like the name and the nostalgia from their previous runs, but they weren't talented enough to hang with Illinois. Illinois just has too many weapons and man, if they get through Houston, obviously you look at an Iowa or Nebraska facing you to get to a Final Four.
Is
You'd take that in a
absurd.
heartbeat.
Yeah, that is absurd. And then looking at, Houston, they took care of Idaho easily, and then they really just took care of Texas A&M in the second half and ran away with it, and even the first half a little bit. But I mean, this Houston team, they're not. I still don't think they're as good as they were last year, especially down low. But I mean, with Kingston Fleming's arguably a top five pick, and then with Sharp,
Yep.
and then
And
the other,
Uzon.
yeah, Uzan. So I mean, they're just, and then Calvin Sampson as the head coach. They're just a really great team and scary team to play, especially this time of year.
Yeah, I know. I keep saying they're not as good as they were like the last couple years, which is probably true. But at the same time, I mean, you win both your games by 31 points to get to the Sweet 16. Clearly, you're pretty dominant. Um, This is going to be one of the best Sweet 16 games, I think. It's just such a good matchup. Illinois wants to just get up and down the court and score. Houston, known historically as a defensive team, but obviously can score too. And like you said, they have a really good guard. So I'm excited to watch. I don't even know. Yeah. I'm excited to see if Samson lets it become a game that just gets up and down the court, but I feel like he's going to try to slow it down and make Illinois grind it out.
And then who do you have in this one?
I'm going to lean Houston and 2 point game, super close.
Houston is favored by 3.5 in this one. I'm going to lean Houston as well, just because I've watched them a ton this year, being the Big 12, and I just think I just think there's a better team at the end of the day. And that game is also on Thursday. That will be after the Iowa game.
Yeah, it's going to be a great one. I think Illinois maybe has more talent, but I think they're more prone to kind of like getting knocked off their game if you force them to grind it out. And that's what I could see happening.
And just kind of collapsing as well with the head coach they have in Underwood. I don't think Houston has that fear as much with Sampson and. But looking at who's going to come out or advance to the Final Four from this South bracket, regardless of who wins between Iowa and Nebraska, do you think they have a chance to probably knock off Houston, or what are your thoughts?
I definitely think the winner of Iowa Nebraska can play a close game, whether it's Illinois or Houston. But if you're just asking me, put my money on who comes out of these four, I think it's Houston. In general, I think it's the winner of Houston, Illinois. As much as I want to kind of just be a homer for Iowa, I mean, sure, they could make it there, but am I expecting that? No, I do think Houston or Illinois is going to get to the Final Four.
Yeah, and I think my fear with Iowa is they looked so good against Florida, and McCollum always says we can beat anyone. Our guys just have to believe it, and I think beating Florida helps. But then you look at this team, and this is the same team that lost to Penn State, and you wonder, can they keep consistently play this well?
Right. It's my thing. I actually thought we had like not no chance versus Florida, but a small chance because we've been in so many games this year against better teams, but we just couldn't get over the hump.
Hmm.
That's kind of what I thought was going to happen in this game. Now that they've done it, sure, maybe they can do it a couple more times. But yeah, if you just like odds tell me that we're always going to be in the game, it's just a matter of can we find the offense to win the game?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And then we're going to go ahead and move on over to the West bracket. I'm going to stop the recording there and we'll restart it just so that because I forgot to do that, and I think we forgot to do. Moving over to the other side of the bracket, we have Arizona advancing to the Sweet 16 as they took care of Long Island fairly easily, and beat Utah State by 12. They were never really out of control of that game. They were always leading by a decent margin. But Arizona's just so good, as we said in previous podcasts, and they're still my pick to win it all. Just an incredible team. They got Jaden Bradley and Braden Burris, I think is his name, and Joe Pete, and their big center is like 7 foot. Just an incredible team. What are your thoughts on Arizona so far?
Yeah, kind of like I said last week too. They were my pick to win it all. Took care of business both rounds easily. Always in control. Kind of spread the wealth against Utah State, where they had 4 of their 5 starters with double digits, and then that Karchenkov, the center that you're talking about, had 9 points. So yeah, they're just really, really good, really strong at every position. And I guess I will say this Arkansas game is one of the most scary matchups that I think they could see in the whole tournament. So that'll be a crazy game.
Yeah, and I mean, you got Arkansas who led it by taking care of Hawaii, and they beat High Point, who High Point upset Wisconsin at the last second on a layup, the guy's first 2 point shot of the year, first made 2 point shot of the year. That was an incredible game to watch. But
Yeah, as a Calipari hater, former lover, I was definitely hoping for High Point to pull off a second upset. They gave him a better fight than I thought, honestly, but just not quite enough to get over the hump. It's just I knew that would happen where Arkansas gets a Hawaii team that just, was never going to beat them. And then the bracket opens up. And while the game against High Point was close, I mean, you couldn't ask for a better draw to get to the Sweet 16. Now, granted, they're facing an unreal Arizona team, but Darius Acuff and the guys around him
Brazil
can,
and
yeah, Brazil, Billy
Tom
Richmond,
Thomas.
yep, those four can easily hang with Arizona.
Yeah, I mean that will be a great game, and that game is also taking place on Thursday. Sandwich kind of in between Iowa and the other Iowa and Houston and Illinois. Um,
Yep.
and going down to the bottom half of the bracket, we got 11 seed Texas in the Sweet 16. I mean, who saw this coming?
Yeah, I kind of thought, and I think I mentioned it last week, that the winner of Texas NC State would beat BYU, and I picked Texas after that game happened. I, I don't think they're amazing, but they have enough talent, and Sean Miller has always been a good coach. So I wasn't surprised to see them beat a Gonzaga team that's just good but not amazing this year. But yeah, I certainly wouldn't have thought they were making the Sweet 16, but here they are, on a little run. Could easily beat this Purdue team, but I don't think they will.
And going back to how Purdue got here, Purdue took care of Queens, and Miami gave them a good game. Miami gave them a really good game, and through most of the second half. And I was impressed by Miami and their first year coach Lucas, right? And just kind of Purdue is Purdue, and they got arguably one of the best point guards in the country in Smith. They got Hoffman underneath and that other big man underneath. But Purdue, as we know in the NCAA tournament, is prone to choke sometimes, and that is a big concern this game.
Yeah, I think they kind of took care of business, like you said. That Miami game, while it was a good game, they were also always in control. Braden Smith, Ian Fletcher Lawyer, both those guys in the backcourt been there forever. They kind of know what to expect in the tournament. Like you said, Trey Kaufman Wren, he's just always been really solid. Um, Clough, their center, again, he's kind of like a below the rim player, but he's solid, and I like him to beat Texas, and I think they're gonna give Arizona or Arkansas a good game, but I don't think they'll be able to get by. But I'll give them credit. They're playing a lot better than I thought they would be, and they've had a strong first weekend.
Yeah, they're taking that momentum for their Big Ten championship, and hopefully going to make it into a Final Four run. I think regardless of who wins between Arizona and Arkansas, I'm probably taking them as my Final Four team.
I agree. I think the winner of that game goes to the Final Four. Please, for the love of God, be Arizona. But yeah.
And then going down to the Midwest bracket, we got the mighty Michigan, who looked dominant. Granted, they beat Howard and St. Louis, so, kind of not really extreme challenging teams there. But then you look at how Alabama got to the Sweet 16. They took care of Hostros out there. A guard who was arrested for marijuana and is no longer on the team. And then they just dominated Texas Tech by 25 points. Granted, Texas Tech was 4 for 23 at one point, I saw from the three-point line. But, just kind of, I'm shocked Alabama's in the Sweet 16.
Yeah. This is weird for me. I'm not shocked because they Hofstra, but some people had him as an upset pick, but they got through them. I knew Texas Tech was going to be Akron simply because I think McCaslin's that good of a coach, but without JT Toppin, I just I thought the Alabama Texas Tech game was gonna be closer than it was,
Yeah, I think
but
maybe that's what surprises me the most is it was a 25-point game.
right, two teams who have lost one of their best players. Now I weirdly feel like Alabama's gonna keep the Michigan game close, but I mean, it like you said, Michigan's been dominant so far, so
And
we'll see.
Michigan, Michigan is favored by 10.5 in this game.
Right. Alabama's one of those teams that they have the talent. I guess we'll just see what happens because if they're not shooting hot, they can get destroyed too.
Yeah, yeah. And going down to the bottom half of the bracket, we have Tennessee upsetting Virginia to get to the Sweet 16. That was a really good game, and Tennessee beat Miami of Ohio fairly easily, and took care of Virginia. And Virginia beat Wright State to lose to Tennessee. Were you able to watch any of this game?
Yeah, both the Tennessee Miami Ohio game. I was hoping for a closer game, especially after Miami Ohio just couldn't miss in that playing game. But and same Virginia Wright State was closer than I thought. Entertaining though, and then this second round game with Tennessee and Virginia, I kind of thought Tennessee was going to beat Virginia. Virginia was, I mean, they were solid. They gave Duke that good game in the ACC tournament championship, but I, Tennessee beating them didn't really surprise me, I guess. And they've been playing well. And like I told you last week, they're super talented. They have Nate Ament, that stud freshman. So I'm not surprised to see them here, but at the same time, I don't see them beating Iowa State, but we'll get there.
Yes, and what we talked about, Iowa State got there as well. Um, Going down to the bottom half of the bracket, or final two games here, we got Kentucky upsetting St. Clair or beating St. Clair in overtime after a last-second buzzer beater by Oway to send it to overtime, which is a beautiful shot. And great game by them as they just dominated the overtime period. Iowa State lost Justin Jefferson in the first, I think, 3 or 4 minutes of the game against Tennessee State, as he could not put any weight on his foot, and panic was starting to set in, and definitely for me it was setting in, because I know how important Jefferson is to the team, especially offensively. But we took care of Tennessee State, and then the game against Kentucky was a battle in the first half. We couldn't really make a three-pointer. We started 0 for 11, and then Lipsy found Heisey in the corner with about 2 seconds left on the shot clock, and around in the first half. Heisey drove the three, and Iowa State was up by one, and they never looked back from that point, starting in the second half.
Yeah, well, going back, so Kentucky game obviously in the first round was like awesome in terms of March Madness. The OA shot is just one of those like, oh my gosh, like what just happened? And like you said, kind of just controlled the overtime period. But big picture, it goes back to what I said about Pope. I just don't think he's good for the program. We haven't been good this year or last year, even if you want to pick out some really big wins we've had. It's just like, why are you struggling against Santa Clara? And in the moment, it's like, oh, we advanced, anything could happen. Start out hot against Iowa State. Really, what happened is we hit a few threes, and then TJ switched up Iowa State's defense and started just double teaming everything. And that's exactly what you need to do against this Kentucky team that's not good at handling ball pressure.
Well, yeah,
And
they don't have a true point guard, so I mean that.
right. So it was just like the second Iowa State made its adjustment, um, Pope just had no answer and got exposed. And it's going to be kind of a brutal offseason for me because sure, I can talk myself into whoever returns and whoever they get in the portal is like, that's, you can do the whole like, oh, well, we're going to be
Yeah,
good next year. But he's had 2 years of nothing to make me believe that he's just going to all of a sudden change the trajectory of the program. And so certainly we'll never forget the OA buzzer beater in the first round. Um, it's just a pretty sad point for where uh, traditional blue blood powerhouse program is right now.
yeah, and a lot. I mean, we know Kentucky doesn't have a true point guard, but a lot of those turnovers in the second half or even in the game, were just from making bad passes, throwing it out of bounds, just simple stuff that by this time of the year you shouldn't be making as a team.
Right. The knock all year has been like fundamentals and basketball IQ are just like not there at all. And like you said, how can you be at the very end of the season and that's your problems? So um it's just I don't know. I'm so down on it that it's hard to pick out any positive spots. And personally, I think if you do that, you're just trying to sugarcoat the bigger overall problem, which I ultimately believe is needing a new basketball coach. And it just sucks to say that after only 2 years, but it's where the program's at.
Well, yeah, and then there was the NIL issue that came out with Kentucky and kind of the, not an issue, but how much money was offered to somebody at Michigan, and the coach was kind of elusive on that, which is kind of odd to me.
Right.
Um, but yeah, just the whole thing with that, and I mean, the chemistry of Kentucky, like you could tell the difference. Iowa State was playing as a team. It felt like
Right.
Kentucky was not. Um, And I even had other reporters that followed the first round game said just the chemistry on the court was so much different than other teams in the tournament, and it's hard to win when you don't have that chemistry.
Yeah. Again, another thing that's been an issue all year. Yeah, you had your starting point guard get hurt for the year, but like, why did you have no backup plan or no backup point guard? It's always been trying to piece things together, and it's an embarrassing way to end your season to get blown out in a second round game. I don't care who the team is. If you're a powerhouse, that should never happen.
Well,
Um,
and especially Iowa State without Jefferson. I mean,
right.
not that I think Kentucky was going to win or should have won anyway, but to get blown out by 19 without them having their best player and being in the game at halftime was just really hard to swallow, I think, as a Kentucky fan.
Totally. It's just like Kansas, Kentucky, Duke, Arizona, Connecticut. If you see any of those losing a second round NCAA tournament game by 15 plus, you're just like, wow, that program's not where they should be. So it's not a knock on Iowa State at all. And like you said, Iowa State doesn't even have like essentially their best player, which made it's just kind of made it hurt even more.
Yeah, and I think, it also allowed other players to step up for Iowa State. And I
Right.
mean, they're definitely going to need them in the Tennessee game because we don't know. I don't think Jefferson is probably going to be back. And honestly, part of me, with the way the team is playing without him, I don't know if I want him to mess up what they have going. And the reason I say this is I understand Jefferson's a great player. I absolutely love Jefferson. But defensively, having Heisey on the floor with Torrey and Lipsy, you have three lockdown wing players that can just shut down threes, shut down drives to the lane. And then you can put Momcilovic and Buchanan or Plata underneath, and they just have to box out, and the guards can come in and get the rebounds. And it kind of hides Milan's defensive uh, capability a little bit because him guarding out on the wing, he gets burnt so bad. He gets drove by, he gets crossed up, he just gets beat on the wing. But underneath, it's a lot easier for him to guard with his length. And I just think better overall, he's better underneath. And we're better with the three guards, even though that messes up our rotation a little bit of who comes off the bench with Bateman and a couple of those guys. I just think defensively we're better. We can apply better ball pressure and we can deny the ball when they dribble to the corners and we do the double team off the screens. I mean, I just think defensively we're such a better team right now with the rotation we have with Heisey in there.
Yeah, I mean, you would know better than me in terms of like team chemistry. I always struggle to say like you go without Jefferson for a game and a half or a game and three quarters to say that they're better without him. But I understand what you're saying, that they've looked actually awesome without him. Um,
And that's not saying I don't want him there. I definitely want him there.
right.
I know we need him, but defensively, I think even without him, we can still win this game against Tennessee.
Yeah, and as someone who's watched Tennessee a lot this year and every year, Rick Barnes, he kind of just plays like bully ball where they're going to be as physical as possible. I don't think um, that hurts Iowa State at all because I think they are kind of the same way and they're well equipped to play that type of game.
Yeah, and even
Um,
Iowa State, just how their guards getting the turnovers, just driving to the hoop and creating contact and getting the fouls. Like Iowa State's not afraid to create contact, and I think that's really important for guard play, and it allows you to be such more aggressive. Because being aggressive and physical is what Iowa State, not only as a defense, wears you down, but it just breaks you as a team eventually.
Agreed. And that's why I think this game is going to be so fun to watch because it's two teams who kind of try to do the same thing physically. It'll just, um, I think it's going to come down to whatever team, one, can stay out of foul trouble, but two, whichever team stars between Tennessee having I would say Nate Ament, but then also Jacoby Gillespie against seeing what Momchilovich and even Lipsy, and then I guess if Jefferson plays, I don't think he will though.
No, and I don't. And I mean, you look at Lipsy. Lipsy's in his final year. The heart and soul of Ames really being from Ames himself. And you know, my uncle questioned whether he was injured after the first game because he only had 3 points and he didn't really drive the hoop like he typically does. And I'm like, we were in control that game. We really didn't need him to drive to the hoop and potentially get injured. But against Kentucky, he was definitely aggressive. He wanted that ball. He was in control of the game the entire time, and you knew he was a senior out there, and he is a leader, not only offensively, but again, I think his defense is far more important than his offense, because he gets 4 to 5 steals a game lately, it seems like, and he's just, on the final play of the half, when Kentucky was going to hold for the last shot, and then he just got the back pick on the center in the middle of their play, and then we just got the final shot, and that's a winning play to do something like that. And I love Jalen Lipsy to death.
Yeah, I think like you said, sure, he maybe has some sort of lingering injury. I think a lot of players are dealing with stuff like that at this point, but he's the type of guy where he's so tough, you're never really gonna know, and he is gonna give it everything he has to just get through the next round. And so I don't worry about him in this Tennessee game. I think he matched up actually really well with them. Um, it's gonna be a fun one to watch. Like I said, I think Iowa State. I I would be surprised if they don't win, but obviously I'm expecting a close game.
Yeah, I mean, Iowa State's only favored by 4.5. Currently, I would assume that's without Jefferson, but I've also seen Jefferson is officially ruled out, that the line could flip to favor Tennessee, which I find kind of very interesting, but also understandable at the same time. But based on also the reports I've seen, Tennessee kind of struggles with ball pressure as they're, I think, 209th in the turnover department. So I think if Iowa State ratchets them up and just continues to play their lockdown defense they have been, that Iowa State could be able to not coast, but be able to kind of inflict the same type of force on like they did on Kentucky on Tennessee.
Agreed. There is a world where they run away with this one, maybe 12 to 15 point game, because I've seen Tennessee play some really bad games. But granted, Iowa State, they had a few weeks where they didn't play their best either. So like you said, I think Iowa State at 4.5. I think that definitely is without Jefferson. But I don't know. I guess we'll see where that goes. I don't think he's playing though.
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason to. I mean, I don't know if he is an NBA player, but there's no reason to risk whatever future he has for one game or 2 games, whatever it may be. Um,
Right. Agreed.
and then going to the Elite Eight matchup, which we're probably going to assume Michigan and maybe Iowa State. I don't know if
hmm
I don't know if Iowa State has enough to beat Michigan. Um,
I think there's a world where they can win that game, but let's say they play 10 times. I'm probably taking Michigan 7, maybe 6.
yeah, I mean, I think my biggest fear with Michigan is they have their center. Their center is big and
Right,
massive.
right.
And Iowa State, in my opinion, sure we can double team him, um, as soon as he catches the ball, but he's literally like 7 foot. So like as long as he doesn't bring the ball down, we're not going to be able to get the ball from him. Lipsy isn't going to be able to jump up and knock the ball away from him. So I think that's definitely a fear. Um, but I think Michigan probably makes the Final Four from this bracket at this juncture, just watching them the first 2 games. But I'll be excited to watch the Elite Eight game, whoever it is.
Agreed. I think that'll be a great game. I think I'd obviously pick Michigan, but I've said all along, outside of those four number one seeds, I was gonna put Iowa State and Houston probably as the two teams most likely to make the Final Four, other than a one seed.
Yeah, yeah. So, and an interesting note on Tennessee is, I think when they get 19 plus assists a game, they're 13-0. So if Iowa State can keep those assist number down, that will be an interesting factor as well.
Yeah, very good point.
And then just wrapping up in our conclusion of who we have in the Final Four. Um, we did forget to do the first. We forgot to do the Final Four from the East, but I think I'm going to take Michigan State for the Final Four from the East over Duke or St. John's. Who are you taking for the East, Andy?
Yeah, I think it's going to come down to Michigan State against Duke, just probability wise, even though I'd love to see St. John's knock them off. I picked Duke to win that game, but give me Michigan State. I'll ride with you on that one.
Okay, and then going down, we have Houston or Illinois versus the winner of Iowa and Nebraska. I think we both have, regardless who wins, Illinois or Houston, they probably beat Iowa or Nebraska. But I,
I
I have
agree.
I have Houston as the Final Four team from that from the South region.
That's what I'm going to be taking too. Although, let's just
Let's just
put
see. Yeah,
Iowa on upset alert, and
yeah,
maybe McCollum gets us to a Final Four.
yeah. Maybe he does in the first year, and the Fran era is completely forgotten. We will see.
Right.
And then up in the West, I think we both had the winner of Arizona or Arkansas making the Final Four, and most likely beating Purdue in the Elite Eight. I think that's still my pick. I still have Arizona winning it all, and I still think they're the ones that make the Final Four from the West bracket.
Yep, I'm still riding that. I'm scared, but give me Arizona to beat Arkansas, and then they take care of. I'm assuming Purdue, but Texas as well.
Yeah, yeah. Then we just did the Midwest bracket, and I think we both have Michigan going from there. And with that being the weekend only going to the Final Four, we'll make our picks for that next week after we see the teams that are there. But any closing thoughts, Andrew, before we wrap up our
I
cast
mean,
here?
as always, an awesome opening weekend. Really, not a whole lot of crazy upsets, but that doesn't bug me. And the funny thing is, the craziest one was my Iowa Hawkeyes. So, just another display of why the opening weekend of the NCAA tournament is the best sporting event of the year. And I do think because there aren't a lot of upsets so far, that we're going to see a lot of high quality games this weekend, which is always what you want, and hopefully not a lot of blowouts. So I think I'm just going to be enjoying that there's a lot of really good teams left versus um, several of those high seeds that can ultimately fizzle out.
Yeah, and I wanted to get your opinion. Do you think there aren't as many upsets because of the NIL stuff like that and teams plucking good players from smaller schools? Or what are your thoughts on why there's not as many upsets?
Yeah, when I saw people saying that, I think that's one of those like just like quick to react over a year where there's not a lot of upsets. My
Mm-hmm.
thought is, okay, NIL is gonna pull these best mid-major players to the power programs. But guess what? Next year, there's gonna be a lot of really good mid-major players who will get pulled the following year. So sure, I guess you can't accumulate as many good players because you're assuming that each year you lose a couple as a mid-major. But watch next year, there's upsets left and right. So I'm not buying that. Give me like 10 years of NIL sample size
Mm-hmm.
before we start saying that the whole like Cinderella
NIL,
aspect.
yeah, NIL killed Cinderella, whatever that
Right.
storyline is.
It's Do I think it could be something that's for real? Sure, but I don't buy it yet.
Makes sense, makes sense.
I mean, didn't last year we had the four number one seeds in the final four, so it's like, yeah, we'll see.
We'll see. We'll give it a couple more years before we officially make our take on that and see what the data says.
Agreed.
Thanks for joining us for another podcast of The Rational Homer. Your support means a lot to me. Notable games that are happening on Thursday and Friday locally is the Iowa Hawkeyes playing Nebraska at 6:30 Central Time on TBS or True TV. And then Iowa State plays the late game on Friday at roughly 9:10 on TBS or True TV. As of Monday afternoon, Joshua Jefferson is still an unknown for Iowa State. Hopefully he can go, but we will see. Hopefully find out later this week when they have their media session. But that would do it for episode 5 of The Rational Homer. And remember, if you have any questions or comments or suggestions for sports-related content you'd like me to react to, send an email to rationalhomer@gmail.com.